Hey, what's up, everybody? Good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Victorious Ones podcast, the place where gaming meets comics, meets sports, meets movies, as well as inspiration. Of course, I'm your host, King Von Jr. You can follow me on social media on Twitter at 301 King Von Jr. You can follow me. You can also follow the show's Twitter page at VictoryPod1. I'm also on Instagram at Mr. King Von Jr. You can follow the podcast Instagram page at Victorious Ones Podcast. Of course, I'm also the social media producer for Perfect Plex Talk Radio, hosted by a friend of the program, Mike Knox, on Mondays at 6 p.m. And so, when I say that there's a lot to go into when it comes to this week's episode, quite a bit of material cut out for me. So we're going to cover a variety of things. Obviously, the NFL recap. Excuse me. Like I said, we're going to be going over the week 3 recap of the NFL. Of course, congratulations to AJ Wilson as well for winning our 4th WNBA MVP award. Of course, I'm going to talk about of course, I had seen Demon Slayer over the weekend as well. And so of course I've also seen WrestlePalooza, and in the trailer for Wolverine. The Wolverine game came out. I'm going to share my thoughts about that. It finally came out. Of course, and when it comes to the week in wrestling, I'm going to talk about WrestlePalooza, and so that's my main focus, as well as just the week in wrestling itself. Like just as far as the aftermath of WrestlePalooza, there's just as much to talk about as the show itself. So without further ado, let's plug right in. Let's dive right in. For those that that want to watch by way of YouTube, it's youtube.com/@VonRest Virginia. Please make sure to like, subscribe for more great content. So as far as that's concerned, and I also want to make an announcement that when it comes to the merchandise, says there's a new item coming soon. Of course on the podcast, merchandise website, bigcartel.com. For those of you who are big NBA fans, Laker fans, this is definitely gonna be something very exciting for you. And paying homage to to Laker icon. You're gonna love it, and you've already shared it anyway. But like I said, it's a really cool Magic Johnson shirt. Commemorating his championships, and the house, pretty much the house the Magic built, if you will. And for those that are like diehard Laker fans, or just love basketball, it'd definitely be something that you'll truly enjoy. But yeah, like I said, moving on. Like I'm going to talk about a little bit of basketball a little bit in a second. But of course, we're going to go into my NFL recap. This is NFL Week 3. And so now, let's go into it. So of course, the week started off with the Bills defeating the Dolphins 31-21 on Thursday Night Football. And so when it comes to Sunday games, the Vikings just blew out the Bengals 48-10. I mean, that's what happens when Cincinnati's star quarterback is out for the season. So like I said, 48-10. The Jaguars defeat the Texans 17-10. The Colts destroy the Titans 41-20. The Commanders defeat the Raiders, crush them 41-24. The Eagles defeat the Rams 33-26. The Panthers blew out the Falcons 30-0. Like Atlanta was on vacation, right? Forgot that was a game. So the Steelers defeat the Patriots 21-14. Browns defeat the Packers 13-10. Surprisingly, the Buccaneers defeat the Jets 29-27. Of course, the Chargers defeat the Broncos 23-20. The Seahawks completely blew the Saints out 44-13. It got to the point where I'm like, you know what? Why are they even still playing? I mean, it was just so far out of reach. Might as well just stop the game right then and there. But yeah, like I said, Seattle destroyed New Orleans 44-13. The Saints still have not recovered after Drew Brees had retired. So they're still in that phase, lull or whatever wherever his tailspin they're in right now. The Bears crushed the Cowboys 31-14. It was unwatchable. And so what? So 49ers defeat the Cardinals 16-15. The Chiefs destroyed the Giants 22-9. Russell Wilson might as well, go home and be a family man at this point, because he's been benched. He's been replaced for the rest of the season. And as far as Monday Night Football, obviously the game of the week. The Lions defeat the Ravens 38-30. I picked the Ravens to win, but the Lions, Detroit, they're not a slouch either. But so that's the recap of of this week when it comes to the NFL. And so when it comes to, as I was talking about basketball earlier, I want to say congratulations to Las Vegas Aces superstar, two-time WNBA champion, two-time WNBA Finals MVP, four-time league MVP, the one and only Miss Asia Wilson. And so that means out of 8 seasons, half that time she has won that award. She's the first, she's become the very first player, only WNBA player to win that award that many times, and so, and now she's in an elite company when it comes to, athletes that have, basketball players that have won, 4 MVPs or more. And so, so she joins the likes of, of course, not only does LeBron have 4 MVPs, of course, Will Chamberlain has 4 MVPs. Michael Jordan and Bill Russell both have 5 MVPs. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar holds the record with 6 MVPs. So just when it comes to basketball, regardless, WNBA or NBA, whatever, Asia is an elite company. And so, so as far as that, that is rarefied air, right? And so I saw a statistic where Asia joined, I want to say it was LeBron, Kareem, and Bill Russell as the only players to have 4 MVPs before the age of 30. So like I said, this is Asia's 4th. Like I said, LeBron's last MVP was in 2013, so that was before his 30th birthday. Bill Russell won 3 straight MVPs from 61, 62, and 63, and he already had one before in 58. So that was before the age of 30 as well. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, first 3 with Milwaukee, 71, 72, 74, and then the first one got with the Lakers in 76. So that was before his 30th birthday. So, So as far as break all that down, like I said, Asia Wilson is in a very rarefied air and elite company. So in my estimation, she has extremely strong case for the GOAT. I have no problem even calling her the WNBA GOAT at this point. And I think that the attempt to try to erase her in favor of, Caitlyn and Angel is insane. The fact that they had more IG followers than her, like, come on, I don't be playing her face like that. So I'm glad that she won the MVP. Let everybody know that she's the undisputed queen and face of women's basketball. So ball don't lie. So like I said, congratulations to her and nothing but the best. I'm pulling for Vegas, to go all the way really. She's definitely my favorite WNBA player, hands down. So as far as that, got that out the way. Also, I want to say that on Friday night, I took the time out. Everybody's, I'm a big fan of anime myself as well. Everybody's talking about Demon Slayer this, Demon Slayer that, whatever. Let me go and see what it's all about. And when I tell you, from a storyline standpoint, cinematic standpoint, animation, fight scenes, all that, it is the best anime movie that I've seen since Dragon Ball Super broke. In terms of recent memory, like that is like that movie right there. It's top tier, and to say it's the best I've seen since that, that speaks absolute volumes. And so as far as that, that is next level storytelling, next level animation. I said, whoa, you know, and you know, what I mean, it just the emotion as well, like it really pulls on you right there. You know, so as far as that, I mean, I was more than thrilled, more than impressed, you know, by, you know, like I said, I was more than thrilled, more than impressed by that movie. So I highly recommend it. You know what I mean? So that's what that is. And so also found out just today, really, that you know, that the trailer finally, as The Rock was saying, um, the trailer came out for Insomniac's Wolverine game for PS5. After, you know, I don't know how many times they teased the idea of a trailer and had, you know, had to do delays, and you know, and it just, you know, these little Easter eggs, you know, or rather, like, you know, throwing out these clues. That trailer was on the way. There's, you know, question with, like, I think it was, they had, you know, a delay or whatever the case is, and you know, that, like, different, you know, questionable reports swirling around when it comes to, you know, like the time of the game, time the game's going to come out, when the trailer's going to come out, you know, whatever. It was just, I think it was a lot in limbo, but finally it has come out. And when I say that, you know, Insomniac, you know, is always in their bag when it comes to these games. You know what I mean? And the thing is, you know, like I said, it reminds me very much, you know, the Spider-Man, you know, Spider-Man, Batman games, and you know, I look forward to it. The trailer itself, you know what I mean? Like, when it comes to comic book gaming, Insomniac right now is on a generational run. They are on a generational run, much like Kendrick has been on a generational run when it comes to his albums. That's what Insomniac is doing when it comes to these games. When we look at the trilogy for Spider-Man, you know, and now, you know, like I said, I can't wait for Spider-Man 3. You know, so that's definitely gonna be, you know, I mean, that's, like I said, I mean, that in itself is gonna be a world beater right there. And you know, unfortunately, even though, you know, they, you know, postponed, you know, like the Black Panther game, but hey, you know what? You know, like I say, at least, you know, at least we get a Wolverine, and Wolverine was one of my original, you know, like has always been one of my favorite Marvel characters of all time, even long before the MCU. You know what I mean? And to see him finally get his just due, I mean, the sky is the limit and beyond. Um, you know what I mean? So you know, so as far as that, like I said, I am thrilled. I cannot wait. And so when it comes to Friday night SmackDown, let's talk about it. Let's smack it down. Let's smack it down. As Janelle was saying, Jobber Tears. Like I said, we're gonna call it let's smack it down. Yeah. So now it's time to talk about that. And this was the go home show before WrestlePalooza. And so, you know, so we saw that Brock Lesnar laid out Corey Graves with the F5. You know, and of course you saw that Drew McIntyre and Cody Rhodes had a brawl, you know, to end off the show. In other SmackDown news, we also saw that Alexa Bliss, you know, we also saw that Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair defeated Chelsea Green and Alba Fire by way of pinfall to retain the WWE Women's Tag Titles after Charlotte hit natural selection. Braun Breaker, Bronson Reed, you know, the Bronze Connection defeated Fraxium by way of pinfall after Bronson hit a tsunami. Then we saw, you know, Sami Zayn, you know, of course, retain the United States Championship by defeating Carmelo Hayes by way of pinfall after hitting the Blue Thunder Bomb. You know, and so and of course I wanted to get into the PWI list. You know, I might you know, have to, you know, might wait for next week to do that. But yeah, you know, like I said, as far as that, you know, I didn't want to get too much into that, you know, to the women's, you know, the women's wrestlers list. But that's, you know, another, you know, like I say, you know, pretty much, you know, like I said, you know, you know, like, you know, just a whole nother story in itself. And so, you know, but yeah, like I say, like I said, as far as that, you know, will, like I say, I will say that, that I'm so, like I said, I will say that this go home show, is, pretty solid. And like I say, in the seat, like I said, Corey Graves and Michael Colgate, both get taken out by Brock Lesnar. I mean, that just lets you know that they'll definitely, amplify, putting things really in overdrive with this. And so, um, I saw WrestlePalooza. Um, except I didn't see it directly on the ESPN app because I found out the day of, the very, I said the very same day, the day of, uh, I was on, I was on Facebook, and so in one of the shots of the DMV wrestling fans, Facebook group, shout out to Greg because he shared a post about WrestlePalooza, being shown in theaters. As everybody, let everybody know that, that there was, the Tyson's, the AMC and Tyson's over in this area, was showing it. And so, long story short, I wasn't quite in that vicinity. So what I did was, I found another movie theater that, that was closer to the area that I was at, and it's out, and they were selling tickets for WrestlePalooza. They had exclusive, seating. You know what I mean? And it's like so as far as that, the theater was, at least, that particular theater was rented out. And so I was like, okay, cool. What I mean? I was like, count me in. And so the thing is, I got to see WrestlePalooza in the movie theater, and this is not the first time I've seen a pay-per-view / PLE, in a movie theater because I saw WrestleMania 38 at an AMC theater. I saw Night One WrestleMania 38 at AMC movies. You know what I mean? So this is nothing new to me. I was like, all right, cool. And and so everything was, was dominated by the ESPN app. So at that time, with Mania 38, it was all on Peacock. But of course, in this case, this was WrestlePalooza was the first PLE on, exclusively on the ESPN app. The era of Peacock has come to an end, and so so of course at the theater, everything started at 6 o'clock because of the pre-show, and so like I said, of course, like I said, with that, just to have that experience, is always cool anyway. I think it's pretty cool, for theaters to do that. But long story short, um, I will say that there were quite a few commercials, and that's being generous. Quite a number of commercials all throughout that time, all throughout the viewing. Um, and so and of course there were a few lagging connection issues here, here and there. And I must say that what really got me hooked was that intro. Like I said, but now there's a new intro, but like I say, they show the history in regards to ESPN's connection with wrestling. Whether it's the AWA, early WWF, of course, shout out to them, for showing Vince McMahon. I was like, oh, wow, event signing. You know what I mean? So like I said, as far as that, they show the old school, WWF, days of WrestleMania 1, and I will say, like I said, the music in and of itself, to go along with the intro really got me hooked. I said, all right, then I'm in for, definitely I'm in for a ride. And so I would say the intro was the best part of the whole thing. You know what I mean? And so, now we have, of course, ESPN even gave WrestlePalooza a C. I think because of the fact that it's on ESPN, and the thing is, ESPN takes itself much more seriously when it comes to sports, and so they're going to grade, on a tighter curve. They're going to grade on a much higher curve, much tighter curve rather, than than a typical wrestling outlet, whether it's podcasts, or anything like that. And so I'm sorry that it's, and course, as far as that, that's a big reason why. But I want to give but as far as that, I will say that WrestlePalooza took place in Indianapolis. It took place, it took place at I forgot what the name of the arena was. It was the Field House in Indianapolis. Actually, it's Gainbridge Field House. Excuse me. It took place at Gainbridge Field House in Indianapolis, home of the Pacers. And the reason why it was at a basketball arena is obviously because it's football season. So the Colts, of course, they couldn't do it at Lucas Oil Stadium because of the Colts. And so like I said, as far as that, the show starts off, with Brock Lesnar versus John Cena, right? And to see Brock Lesnar, that's a spectacle in and of itself. One of the things I always like to say is that if Doomsday had a human form, he would be Brock Lesnar. And, this is another prime example of that, and so, for like I say, the show only had 5 matches. So it starts off with Lesnar versus Cena. Brock Lesnar. Actually, no, even before all that, Pat McAfee came out to a major ovation. I think he had the biggest ovation of the night. And matter of fact, because he had just come back, from broadcasting college, come from broadcasting a college game day, and so for him to make the travel, back home to Indianapolis, he came out to a hero's welcome. I will say that, and so after that, like I said, after that, of course, things start off with Brock Lesnar versus John Cena. As Pat always likes to say, the alpha male of our species has returned, and and that is in this case, that is in the form of Brock Lesnar. Brock is a physical phenom specimen, you name it. And I like how, so after he came out, John Cena comes out with the kids, right? And of course Cena has 99 PLE wins, and so he's one PLE win away from having obviously 100, and that means they'll put him second place all time, behind the Undertaker, who has 107 PLE wins all time, right? And so of course Cena came out with the Pacers colors, yellow and blue. He had a yellow Cena farewell tour shirt representing the Pacers. The kids came out with yellow shirts too, and so I was like, it's a great excellent feel good moment. Get everybody excited and all that stuff, right? However, I had a feeling that when some kids came out, Cena was going to end up losing. And those kids were going to go home crying. Because it's just like there's no way that the Cena's going to have that big entrance and just let him beat Lesnar like that. Even though even though that was the original plan for him to win, but last minute, whatever the case is, all that. But and of course, not only does Cena have this intro, Paul Heyman came out and personally introduced Brock Lesnar himself. I was like, oh, so before Alicia Taylor could even get any words out, Paul Heyman comes out with his own microphone. Says, "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul Heyman. And of course, my client, in this ring, standing 286 pounds, the Beast incarnate, the reigning, conqueror, whatever the case, the whole thing, the Brock Lesnar intro, right?" So I was like, it's on now. It's on. And even though the match lasted in less than 10 minutes, less than 9 minutes, and of course, Cena had his, surge of offense, 3 straight attitude adjustments. He ended up in 4 total. And so Brock Lesnar, getting a number of German suplexes, not as many as he did at SummerSlam 2014. But Lesnar won once again and dominated in convincing fashion. He's consistently had John Cena's number. His record against Cena is 5-2. And so this is Cena hasn't gotten beat like this by Lesnar since SummerSlam 2014. That was the Suplex City match. 16 German suplexes, 2 F5s to win. But in this case, Brock didn't need that many German suplexes. Yeah, maybe like 7 of them and about 6 F5s, overall. And so, but of course, it was grand opening, grand closing. And the winner of this match, Brock Lesnar, he ends up F5 in the referee as well. I was like, man, and of course, somebody made a post. I shared it too. So that means in 3 different decades, I've seen, Brock Lesnar whoop John Cena. Oh, that's now that think about it, yeah, like when you put it in perspective, yeah, it has been that long. In each decade, Brock Lesnar has destroyed John Cena. And he's seen his kryptonite for real. But yeah, of course it's still a little bit disappointing. Not only did he lose, but the way he lost and the way that this retirement tour has been booked has been less than stellar, to say the very least, especially with a heel run. And I've already been talking about that before, but it's a whole other story, especially with The Rock's absence at WrestleMania. It's just like that run lost so much momentum, it lost so much firepower. It's like it got his legs cut out from under. Like it's just like there's no more of a purpose because the final boss thing was over and done, right? And so yeah, so as far as that whole thing was the wrong wrestling, but eventually, Cena made a turnaround. He ended up seeing the light, just in time for SummerSlam. We dropped the belt back to Cody Rhodes. So as far as that, but the thing is, with the way Cena's been booked, like I said, now with the heel run, having a match against Logan Paul, of all people, like, come on now, and the thing is, we can say what we want to, but I know for sure Vince McMahon would have never, ever, ever booked John Cena to look like this on his way out the door, and his farewell tour, his retirement. Vince would have given Cena a victory lap. And side note, recently, Cena went on Twitter and called out Triple H, and he wanted to have, Cena wanted to have a match with AJ Styles, so he used his voice online to push Triple H up against the wall, like a bully that pushes a kid up against the locker. Cena had to do that online with Triple H, in order to demand a match with AJ Styles. And Triple H like, you know what, say no more. And it's now confirmed that John Cena versus AJ Styles one last time is going to be at Crown Jewel it's going to be in Perth, it's going to be in Australia. And so I was like, cool, all right then. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where, hey, but yeah, like I said, it goes to show, that sometimes bullying does work. Sometimes politicking does work. As much as people gave Cena a hard time, for being Super Cena, allegedly playing politics backstage. In this case, it was meant for the better. Much like how a lot of people called Kobe a ball hog and shot, saying they shot too much and all that stuff. But then, in the last game of his career, everybody's cheering him on to drop 60 points. Hopefully, Cena's last match in DC will be his 60-point game. But yeah, but as far as that, like I said, I like how Cena has really taken control of his narrative and and pushed for for this AJ match. And so like I said, as far as that, it looks like that could be the great thing that could really turn the tide for for these last 5 dates that Cena has left. Can you believe once you get to December, by the time we get to Christmas, and after, by the time we get into the Christmas holiday, John Cena will be no more. The fact that I'm saying that is unreal. By the time we get to December 25th, Cena's last day is going to be December 13th on Saturday. But once it's, like I said, once we get to holiday season and celebrating all that, everything like that, for the first time ever, by the time we get to Christmas, John Cena will be no more in WWE. Wow. Enjoy it while you can. I definitely have Cena Superman, drawn on the horizon. Yeah, I don't want to have to belabor this any further. With the rest of this, with the rest of this card, let me keep moving on. So like I said, of course, Brock Lesnar defeats John Cena. He pulverized John Cena. So that was my first prediction. I was right. Next up, we have Braun versus Braun. Braun and Braun versus the Usos. Excuse me. So we have Usos versus the Vision, and I like how Usos reunited, and once again had matching gear. They came out with those army green jerseys. And so they went the interest music went between the Usos standard music to Jey Uso's solo music. You know what I mean? And so I was like, all right, cool. And so I just as far as that nostalgia, it was great. And so, like I said, I like the color coordination for the Usos, on Saturday, as well as for the Vision. Like I said, matching black and gold for Braun and Braun. LA Knight was, LA Knight was a special guest referee for whatever. I couldn't care less. So the first half of the match was pretty sluggish. And so it's like primarily was about as far as what Liberty's LA Knight was going to extend on both teams. And he definitely extended his fair share of liberties in this match. Certain things he did kind of turn a blind eye to, but but surprisingly, he allowed both teams to introduce chairs and tables into the match. The only thing missing was a ladder, but whatever. But anyway, of course, by the time we get to the second half, once the weapons come in, that's when it picks up. After the after the Usos hit a 1D, and of course, definitely like both teams, had a spear fest, landed a series of spears before Jey Uso, the Uso splash for a near fall of Braun Breaker, but then somehow out of nowhere, Jey Uso gets busted open after a Bronson Reed and after slam with chair shots, and so of course led to a delay before Braun Breaker speared Jey, and then of course Braun speared both Usos through the table, and then Bronson Reed finished with Tsunami to seal the victory for the Vision. So, like I said, of course, the match had a slow pace early on. And of course, it ended up having a strong finish. It was definitely the match was very disjointed, to say the least. And it wasn't bad, but obviously, as history shows, the Usos have had far better matches, and Braun Breaker, still has a bit of a ways to go. So of course that prediction was right in that aspect for me. The Vision defeat the Usos, and we also have mixed tag match between CM Punk and AJ Lee. CM Punk and AJ Lee versus Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch. And I like that, CM Punk had that jacket that said AJ's husband, and it was definitely a feel-good match, especially with AJ's first match back in 10 years. You know what I mean? So it was definitely a very storybook, if you will. You know what I mean? It's very, like I said, very feel-good. It's like a homecoming, if you will. However, I will say that for those who are not that familiar with AJ Lee, right, in terms of who she was previously, for them, this would be this current era of AJ Lee would be their only frame of reference, unfortunately. And that means that right now they're not that impressed. And there are people that that I know, who I've talked to, interacted with, on Twitter Spaces and stuff. And they, of course, like to say shout out to Mimi and DDM from Black Wrestling Podcast. They'll be the first ones to admit, that they weren't that familiar with with AJ before this. But right now, they're among those who aren't really all that impressed, about what they see in their aspect, the prospecting, if you will. And yeah, and really, this is more so, just for AJ to shake off the ring rust, right? And so, and the thing about it is that, like I said, the thing is, for those that are familiar with AJ, that they'll have to, grade her based off of, their immediate point of reference, and pretty much that's all I really have to say about that. But like I said, as far as that, of course, Punk and, like I said, of course, Punk and AJ came out, and we also had Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch coming out, and they had the same colors as the Wildberry Pop Tarts. I thought that was pretty funny, but yeah, like as far as that, and matter of fact, I saw something online where they showed that that those colors actually had deeper meaning, and so and of course when it comes to Punk and AJ, they had the rainbow in support of LGBTQ, and so I saw something else that said when it came to Seth and Becky, especially when it came to that purple and light blue, that was those colors to raise awareness for domestic violence, or whatever. And oh man, like I said, I like how they use how they use those colors, at least to make a statement and really make stands, So in terms of that, that's something I truly respect. But outside of that, I will say that when it comes to these mixed tag matches, especially when it comes to intergender matches, well, that's what they are anyway. Mixed tag matches, they're pretty difficult to pull off from a purely wrestling standpoint. And this is more so about entertainment than anything else. It's more about entertainment shenanigans than anything else. And so, and the first half is all about Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch making sure that that the AJ wasn't tagged to the match. Yes, and it was really more so about cutting the ring off, cutting AJ's corner off from Punk. And and so of course eventually the tide changed when Seth Rollins skipped his way into a GTS from CM Punk. Finally got to tag AJ in, and of course we saw that AJ shook off a decade of ring rust and hit the ground running. And of course there's a lot of ridiculousness and chaos that would later ensue. And we had everything from stereo finishing attempts, to even Becky Lynch and CM Punk exchanging sharpshooters, but there was a part of me who felt like the match, was getting felt a little long-winded, to be honest. Um, of course, the match finally ended. We came close to a conclusion. After this dangerous spot where Becky Lynch threw AJ Lee off of when the announce tables on CM Punk and Seth Rollins on the other table, and of course, eventually AJ made it right back to the ring and trapped Becky and the Blackwell submission, to get the win. And so the thing is, the match. I'm glad that thing, like I said, the match felt like I said. I'm pretty sure, I'm not the only one who felt like it did feel, kind of long-winded. It was still great to see, AJ back in action. And the thing is, of course, CM Punk and Seth Rollins did the best they could to, keep things going along. But eventually, the next step's gonna have to be AJ versus Becky for the women's Intercontinental title. And so, and the thing is, I feel as though, all right, so yes, sorry about that. As far as in the background, sorry about that. But as far as that's concerned, I will say that this match was really carried more so by CM Punk and Seth Rollins. With no disrespect to the women, but this was more so to cover up, some of AJ's ring rust, if you will, just to hide certain deficiencies, if you will, to make her look better. But eventually, this was just more so, just to get her feet wet, right? Whereas now that her feet have gotten wet, from this match, if you will, she's kind of, dipped her toe into the water. Now it's time, for AJ to really swim with the sharks, in this case, being Becky Lynch. And so this definitely going to be more of a litmus test, especially dealing with someone someone of Becky's caliber. And before I go any further, we saw that The Undertaker drove his motorcycle up to up to where Stephanie was sitting at, and so he climbs over the barricade, sits next to Steph, and he says, you and me, we've known each other for quite a long time, and the first thing I could think about was back in '99 when Undertaker, did the Ministry of Darkness and abducted Stephanie and tried to get her to marry him and all that type of stuff, So as soon as you said that, I thought about that. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you did. And so the thing is, Stephanie is a very, very, very forgiving person, for something like that. You know what I mean? So like, you literally had this lady fighting for her life for real. And the internet never forgets, the North remembers. So I thought it was, pretty funny that Taker of all people would make this announcement that Stephanie McMahon is officially going to the WWE Hall of Fame. Congratulations to Stephanie McMahon. She is the very first inductee into the Hall of Fame class of 2026. Usually, the thing is, I would think that usually they will wait until around Royal Rumble season to start making these announcements. Even though this past year's this past year's Hall of Fame announcements felt like they were kind of dragging outside of like Triple H's announcement, but so it's like back to back. Triple H goes into Stephanie, and it amazes me that Stephanie goes into the Hall of Fame before her dad does. Before Dad goes to the Hall of Fame, Steph goes in before Vince. That it was never my bingo card, but of course, unfortunately, Vince's transgressions got the best of him. That's another story. So yeah, of course, let's just take a little break from the action. Stephanie was announced, as far as going to the Hall of Fame. Stephanie McMahon is definitely a treasure. the $1 billion princess. She is a diamond uh, when it comes to the WWE, and she's been very instrumental when it comes to women's wrestling in terms of the women's revolution. Just the way that she has, just the way that she has, like pushed boundaries, I mean, rather broken barriers and push boundaries, broken barriers in order for like in order for women wrestlers to have this, to have these opportunities, especially when it came to the women's revolution. So of course she's always been the champion when it comes to women's wrestling. So yes, congratulations to her. Um, it felt a little uneventful, but other than that, like I said, regardless, that's a major, that's a major honor. Um, and as far as that's concerned, you know, um, speaking of ESPN, I don't want to get into get into that list. That's another story. But yeah, something like as far as that, that's an action. And so we have the Women's World Championship match. Io Sky versus Stephanie Bakir. The belt was vacated because of Naomi's pregnancy, and Stephanie was originally going to face her. But the match got scrapped because of the pregnancy, and Stephanie herself recently had just recovered from being sick. And so, and of course, Io had won a match herself to become the number one contender, for the vacated title. And so here we are. I will say that this match was absolutely exceptional. Two of the best women wrestlers in WWE, and two of the best women wrestlers on the planet right now. And the first half was definitely a chess match between Stephanie and Io. Excuse me. Of course, when I say chess match, it was counter after counter after counter. And then by the time we get to the second half of the match, the latter stage, we saw Bakir focus on Io's knee, give her an edge, and so of course, however, she couldn't keep Io down the jeans to the sky after countering her over the moonsault and hitting the SVB. Of course, Io Sky swung the pendulum in her favor with a combination of knee strikes and avalanche Spanish fly, but eventually her knee slowed her down on her second attempt. Of a moonsault, which Stephanie rolled out of the way, head to the top rope and hit her own version of a spiral tapper. AJ Styles did so one spiral tapper, something close to it. It felt like it's a Phoenix splash almost. And so, of course, Stephanie Bakir ends up getting a pinfall, and she is your new Women's World Champion, La Primera, Stephanie Bakir. And I would say that was the absolute best match of the night. And then we have the undisputed WWE Championship match between Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre. Pretty short main event, and of course, never really got out of first gear, and you definitely see that that Cody was dealing with a head injury, of course, caused by Drew's Claymore kick the night before, and so that's what the story was about. Cody just stumbling left and right, and so forth. However, the effects of it, didn't have a bearing on the conclusion of the match. Of course, in the end, ultimately, Cody ends up winning, with Crossroads, and he's still your undisputed WWE champion. So, of course, not too much left to say about it. Other than I'm waiting for Cody versus Randy Orton. You know what I mean? But as far as other than that, it's just like I guess Cody's reign doesn't really have too many consistent dance partners. A lot of his matches, people feel like they're one and dones. But yeah, I would give this about C as well. I would give it about 3 out of 5 U.S. Championship belts, 3 out of 5. Miz U.S. title reigns. Yeah, so like I see, is was what it was. So, I guess a little first impression. Hopefully they really speed up the pace by the time you get into by the time you get into not only Crown Jewel with Cena versus AJ, but especially by the time you get into War Games and beyond, especially when in WrestleMania. And speaking of that WrestleMania poster, it amazes me that Bianca Belair was not on that poster. That disturbs me actually. And of course instead they have Brock Lesnar on there. And of course they have Jay Cargill, but you cannot have WrestleMania without the EST. Plain and simple. So it's just like, when are we gonna see that recovery from that finger? Like, come on now. But as I said before, now it's time to go into the Monday Night Raw portion of this podcast. And when I say that the Joshi girls were the ones who carried Monday Night Raw, they definitely did. This storyline is what carried, Monday night, especially with the build, while the build is on for October 11th's Crown Jewel. Stand out from moment from Monday's episode was between Asuka, Rhea Ripley, Io Sky. And so of course I'm going to get into that in a minute. And I will say that is what carried Monday night. So Raw kicks off. So of course, lately the Monday Night Raw has been on a 7 o'clock, time slot, I guess, because of Monday Night Football. But yeah, like I said, of course, Asuka confronts Stephanie Bakir back, of course, backstage. Back, actually, has another story about talk about that in a minute. But of course, Raw kicked off with Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins coming face to face, and they're set to meet a champion versus champion match at Crown Jewel. And Seth Rollins said he knows what everyone thinks of him, but he wanted to know what Cody Rhodes thought of him. And so, so Cody said that Seth has made questionable decisions, but that Rollins has also changed his life in their past matches, but Rollins is hiding behind the rest of the division. And of course, Rhodes ends by saying that all of the other matches have been one-on-one, asking Rollins if this one would be as well. And for Rollins to remember how many of their previous matches he had won, which is 0. So the fact that Seth is 0-22 against Cody, his losing streak is pretty much the equivalent of the Undertaker's winning streak. Matter of fact, he's lost more matches than Taker won during his streak against one guy. So it's mind blowing to me how Seth historically has technically had Roman's number when it comes to their matches, but he's never had Cody's number. Like, make it make sense. And the thing is, that's why I want Roman to get this W so much more. When they run it back, like, come on now. Yeah. Like, it's like the math ain't math. But eventually I think it's gonna be a slow burn to eventually Heyman turn on Seth as well. His history is shown with the Paul Heyman's track record. And of course, in other news, the War Raiders intend to defeat the New Day and Grayson Waller by way of pinfall in a 6-man no DQ match. It's Penta hit Grayson Waller with the Avalanche Mexican Destroyer. Something that they have been on 2K25. We saw that Stephanie Bakir spoke 2 days after winning the vacant women's world championship at WrestlePalooza. Stephanie, of course, Bakir talked about the sacrifice she made to reach her dream and said she'll be a SmackDown for Tiffany Stratton's WWE Women's Championship match on Friday to see who she'll face. Of course, for the Crown Jewel Championship. And Stephanie, of course, it's great to see that Stephanie Bakir, acknowledged her dad, and her dad was in the front row. That was a great moment to see. Then we have a Bayley defeat Roxanne Perez by way of pinfall after a Rose point. And of course, Lyra Valkyria was definitely taken aback by it. Bayley had asked Lyra backstage to be with her at ringside. Lyra got confused after Bayley had yelled at her the week before. Raquel Rodriguez and Roxanne Perez attacked Lyra during the match. Bayley snapped and of course took Roxanne out And Lyra attempted to congratulate Bailey after the match, but Bailey shoved to the ground and asked why Lyra thought that was okay to touch her. I was like, yeah, this is bipolar Bailey at this point. She's definitely two-faced. There's those voices that are screaming in her head. Then we have a Rusev defeat JD McBobblehead with a submission with the accolade, dominating Mysterio into a Judgment Day teammates before that. They asked for help dealing with Rusev, who's after 30 Dom's IC Championship, and after Finn Balor turned him down, JD was convinced to help when he found out that he had a match with Rusev, and of course the rest is history. And of course Finn Balor came in and made a save for McBobblehead after the match. After Dirty Dom failed to help JD as Rusev continued his attack, of course leading to an argument between Dirty Dom and Finn. It's just like eventually the Judgment Day is gonna have to implode at some point. Like, come on now, it's just like feels like it's just dragging, taking forever. And of course we also saw that Jey Uso defeated LA Knight by way of pinfall after Uso splashed, and Jimmy confronted Jey earlier in the night, asking why Jey was worried about a match with LA Knight instead of a rematch with Division. Jey blamed LA Knight for the loss at WrestlePalooza and brushed off his brother's concerns. And so later Jimmy asked Cody to talk to Jey, but Jey also brushed Cody as well. So we definitely see a change in Jey's character. He's not Mr. bright colored Yeet Man like he was before. He started doing 180, and he would take on more of almost more of Roman's characteristics, if you will. I mean, not too many of them, but we definitely starting to see a 180 when it comes to Jey. And last but not least, the best part of the night. We see that Asuka confronts Stephanie Brock backstage, saying that Stephanie didn't deserve the title and that EO should be the women's world champion. And then Asuka was called by Rhea Ripley because that she was tired of Asuka's behavior before challenging her to a match in the main event. As we see, that was my favorite part of the night. As Rhea Ripley defeated Asuka with a pinfall, but with a pinfall, the scoop of the pin, Kairi Sane reluctantly attempted to interfere and help Asuka, leading to an accidental collision that knocked off the apron, which allowed Rhea Ripley to get the roll up for the victory. Then after the match, Asuka attacked Rhea after the match, spin the mist in her face. And of course Asuka had blue mist, and so Rhea started looking like an avatar or a Smurf, so she became a meme because of that. And so so of course that she encouraged Kairi Sane to join in the attack, and Io Sky ran to the ring and asked Asuka to stop, which Asuka agreed to do. Before eventually hitting Io Sky with the back fist. Then Asuka and Kairi continued their attack on Io and Rhea until the show went off the air. And not only did she hit the back fist, but she just knocked her out cold with that kick too. I was like, man, like Asuka crashing out. This is the best part, when it comes to the Joshi girls carrying the story, and it was great. The thing is, it was great to see anything other than the Vision main event Monday Night Raw. So I would say that this is what saved Monday Night Raw. You know what I mean? And I was like, man, and the thing is, Asuka gives anime villain energy, like Tekken villain energy or something like that. And if anything, I'm campaigning for Asuka to be DLC in Tekken 8 because she's just made for it. You know what I mean? And this is really, at this point, this is not Asuka. This is Kana from Japan. Like this is who we're dealing with right now. I mean, it's like right here. That's why I got this shirt. This has been one of WWE's best shirts in a very, very long time. And I was like, man, like Asuka just. unleash complete chaos. Like, this gives anime villain Demon Slayer energy right now. Like, this storyline, I was like, we're definitely in for, definitely in for the ride of our lives right now. And I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, Psycho Asuka, I'm all for it. And so, last but not least, of course, we're going to talk about NXT. As we saw, the main event was Trick Williams versus Obafemi, winner take all. And of course, it was a great vignette to build up Ricky Saints, as far as his upbringing coming from New Orleans, his underdog story and everything like that. So I definitely like the vignette that they showed for that. And we saw that that Jada Parker, said that she's not done with Lash Legend. So there's more of that story to unfold. You know what I mean? And so yes, so as far as the main matches, this is the final show before this weekend's No Mercy PLE. This is the No Mercy Go Home show, if you will. So we have Oba versus Trick title. Laney Reed versus Candice LeRae speed tournament match. Miles Bourne versus Lexis King in a lights out match. For them to have a match, with all the lights off, I said, man, wow, that was. And of course, the winner of this match had to beat Lexis King. Actually, not Lexis King, but that was the last time they had a match. But but that was my mistake. But as far as the winner of this match, of course, after putting Lexus through a table, I'd say, of course, let me rephrase that. The last time they were in action, Lexus King had won NXT on August 26th. But this time, Miles Bourne got the win by putting Lexus through a Slim Jim table. And so, of course, the winner of that match, Miles Bourne. And so we also have Tavion Heights versus Ethan Page. And of course, the winner of this match, ends up being Tavion Heights in a squash match. Surprisingly, it was over within a blink of an eye. And we saw that Jordan Grace and Ariana Grace had a funny exchange backstage as well. Then we have Candice LeRae versus Fabi Apache, and so as far as that, so of course, Fabi Apache, of course, ended defeating Candice LeRae. Then we have Jordan Grace versus Ariana Grace, the winner of this match, the juggernaut herself, Jordan Grace. We have Dark State versus Joe Hendry and Chase U, and the winners of this match, Dark State. And then, of course, finally, Obafemi versus Trick Williams, and this is when chaos completely ensues and the match ends in no contest. And during the warfare, Ricky Saints goes over to the table with the NXT Championship. As soon as he touches it, Obafemi gets up and touches the title himself. You know what I'm saying? Now on my watch, so eventually they're gonna go toe to toe, face to face for that title. So pretty much that right there, just about wraps it up. And so, time is very much of the essence. And so now it is time for the birthdays. As of course, I like to end any show. So for September 24th, September 23rd, excuse me, Kairi Sane turned. Of course, Kairi Sane turned 37. Matt Hardy turned 51. For September 24th, Stephanie McMahon, future Hall of Famer, turned 49. Steelers legend Mean Joe Green turned 79. September 25th, Fresh Prince himself, the legendary and iconic Will Smith, turns 57. course, legendary Jedi / Joker himself, Mark Hamill, turned 74. NBA legend, Hall of Famer Scottie Pippen turned 60. Of course, local news anchor Wisdom Martin turns 55. Basketball Hall of Famer Bob McAdoo turned 74. Of course, on September 26th, Serena Williams and Asuka both turned 44. And of course, September 27th, which also Damien Priest, turns 43, and Lil Wayne turns 43 as well. And that is it when it comes to the birthdays. And before I go, I would like to give a word of wisdom, and that is to never underestimate the power of your birthright. Never of course, for those who have a relationship with Jesus, never underestimate the relationship that you have with him. Never underestimate the access that God has given you, and always remember, and of course, like I said, never underestimate the power of who you are, and most importantly, we serve a God who trumps Trump, and of course, courtesy of Pastor John K. Jenkins. Just want to throw it out there, and also remember that you are victorious, because greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world. When you put God in first place, you don't have to worry about being in last place. Please make sure to listen to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else that you download podcasts. And of course, you can also watch by YouTube as well. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much for listening. And may this day be the absolute very best day of your life.